This analysis replicates the analysis given in figure 10.14, but carries it out in a little bit easier manner. To begin the analysis, I have added a column called number, and I have numbered each hospital and each sex 1 through 10. So the males in Albemarle are numbered 1 through 10. The males in Beaufort are numbered 1 through 10. And it's the same for the females in Beaufort, Catawba, and so on. Each of these groups of people is numbered 1 through 10. To carry out the analysis, I'm going to create two different pivot tables. The first pivot table will be one that appears in the figure 10.14. The second pivot table will be a larger pivot table that depends on the numbers 1 through 10 for its creation. We'll begin with the smaller of the two pivot tables, and since we already have hospital selected, we can go to Data, Pivot Table and Chart Report, and begin the pivot table. When we say next, the entire area that is contiguous is selected as the candidate for the pivot table. Next gives us the opportunity to create a layout, and the layout for this pivot table will have sex in the columns, hospital in the rows, and length of stay in the data. Again, we will convert sum of length of stay to average of length of stay so that we get the values we need for our calculations. When we say OK, we will put the pivot table on the existing worksheet in G2. Now when I finish the pivot table, this is the result. Again, in order to work with the data in the pivot table, I'm going to copy an area slightly larger than the pivot table, then copy, paste special values, and again I've gotten rid of the pivot table and have now only a table of numbers. These will be used for some of the calculations for sums of squares. The next pivot table that we will produce will be a larger pivot table. We'll go back to Data, Pivot Table and Chart Report. Next, we will put this pivot table on the existing worksheet, and we will put this pivot table in cell M2. Then we will go to Layout, and in the rows we will put number. Then in the columns we will put sex and hospital. And again in the data area, sum of length of stay, and change that to average. And we will say OK and finish. And now we have the pivot table, a large pivot table, which I'll pan through, shown here. Again, in order to work with this pivot table, I'm going to highlight the entire thing plus some additional area, and I'm off the screen now, but I'm going to say copy, and again paste special values. Then, when I clear the highlighting, I now have two sets of data, this set of data and this set of data, which we will use in producing the various sums of squares required for this analysis.